Okay, you're on. Okay. Sorry. You're on recording. Don't mock me.
Okay. So we have a motion from Debbie and a second by Gustav. Any other discussion on the consent agenda? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Abstentions? Okay. All right, motion passes. Item 3, new business. Our first item is the housing policy position paper. After the last meeting, when we had the first draft, we took comments from various cities, council members, and a few of us, and thanks to James for his help as well as Andy. We tried to include as much as we could in this new version, and we went through it with our executive board at our last meeting. We actually ended up having quite a bit of comments, which was good, but it was very frankly challenging to include everything without getting too much into detail. And then the more I think we get into detail, the more difficult it gets to build consensus. So we actually went back and sort of expanded out and tried to come up with more general language. And so that is what you see in front of you. This is just, to preface this is just a baseline. I think it's important for us to, as a cities association, to speak out and make a statement. But these were the points I think which most cities seem to approve. But again, this is a baseline, and every city is welcome to speak freely on your own as well. But this was our attempt to try to put something together as a cities association and use as a basis for when we go out to talk to whether the media. I actually have a request for my local paper to speak with them tomorrow, and I will, and I asked them to wait until we pass this, hopefully tonight, and then also to the legislators when we go out. So yes, that's the idea for this. Any comments, questions? We could go bullet by bullet if you like tonight, or if folks are comfortable with it, take a vote. But I would like to have a vote by the end of the evening if possible. Any comments? If it's all good, then a short meeting.
I'll go first. I have a couple questions.
Sure.
Is there a specific reason to put in a paragraph about CASA? And I'm truly just asking that as a question, because CASA's we're all left the train station and we're really into what the legislative issue is. So I'm wondering if it's really how it is we perceive as it's helpful.
I think, the key to that was the interest of our cities being involved in the conversation, the legislation as it rolls out, based on the CASA principles. So it was really just, kind of pointing out that we weren't included in the original discussion of CASA, and going forward, we urge various entities to include us. So that was I think the main reason why we mention it. But yes, and this is a housing position paper, so it's meant to last a while, I'd say. But open to other comments, or
and also not simply respond to CASA directly.
So I'm confused as to if I'm reading this right. I've got a 2-page document and then a summary. And I don't understand if the summary replaces the first 2 pages or is separate.
This was the old one. So the one that's dated February 2019 was right. To see where we were last month.
Okay.
So I put it in just so that you could see the next page where it says summary first. That is the new document.
And it's dated March.
March 13th.
Got it.
Any other comments?
And,
Updates?
and last week, the draft was 4 pages long.
So, if I could just add to what's already been said, this was an effort to kind of culminate with as much of the comments that were provided during the last meeting into a document that still had some simple messages that came across, that would go across as clearly as we possibly could. It doesn't say everything that we feel as the individual cities provided the input. And that doesn't mean that as we take this to the future steps that we don't, that we have to stifle our discussions based on solely these statements. But this is a point in which it hopefully represents collectively what we can all agree on in terms of our position relative to this. And so anyway, I hope you can see that in the language that's in this document, because I think it does it quite well. Again, it doesn't say everything. It doesn't challenge all the various parameters in their minutia detail that we can all dive into these. But again, it gives us a platform in which we can then engage in discussions with our legislators and others as it comes up. So again, what we're hoping is that this reflects the collective interests, but recognizing the fact that some of us may have additional interests that's not represented in here. And again, there will be an opportunity for us as individuals to be able to communicate those. So I hope that's clear.
Lydia?
So first I want to say thank you so much for putting this together. I know it's a lot of work from last week and even before what you started off with. Now, in terms of, I know that some cities have already written opposition, etc., and then there are some cities that haven't yet. How does this position paper put the cities that haven't yet made a non-supportive stance on it? Just asking.
So again, this is for the cities association, but individual cities, you're open to stating whatever you choose.
So I guess I'm trying to understand as a member. So my city is a member of the cities association, and I'm sorry, I'm new to this. So I'm just trying to understand, since we're a member of the cities association, if we submit a letter on the whole, in a way, Palo Alto is also saying, yes, we agree to this position paper. Whereas Palo Alto hasn't actually decided on either way yet. How does that work on for those cities that haven't?
I just recall in the last meeting where we were thinking if we could advance this or not, your mayor was here and made several, I think, key contributions and seemed behind supporting the cities association voice, which doesn't mean the city of Palo Alto can't express themselves also. I think the idea though is we all have various things to say about it as cities, but we will probably have more influence, our legislators, if we don't just sit on our butts for another month or something, right, and say nothing. The cities association, has talked about housing as an issue for somewhat 4 or 5 years. So I think the idea is we want to be recognized as a group that ought to be consulted as these bills go through, and our legislators really ought to be listening. And we think there's power in numbers, and cities, we won't agree on everything, right? But if we could agree on enough and we can come to consensus, we're stronger in asserting what we think we can be for, and frankly, what issues we have with what proposals sit on the table, than if we don't do anything, which is kind of like the other option here, right? But we put together a letter back in December we, at that time, took all the letters that had been produced to date by our cities. And so our letter was brief. It was one page, as I recall. And there were a whole bunch of cities' letters behind it. This is our more considered response after having another couple of months to digest. So I think the idea is, we want to assert our views on what should be done with housing, and that's our best attempt to come together regionally with one voice.
And I appreciate that. I just
As,
think
as much as we can.
as much as it is, I think that it's a really nice letter. I think in what Rod said about we want to be at the table for the discussion and you missed out on us the last time. I think moving forward in a way, I think that the wording should be a little bit more stronger in terms of saying that we want to be at the table moving forward in terms of deciding on this legislation. And it's just way too nice right now for me. It doesn't, I don't see that being asserted that you need to come to us. And there's
Well, they don't, right? I mean,
Yeah, they
honestly,
don't, right?
our legislators are directly elected. The best we can do is be diplomatic and try to have influence. If we're just like, if we're screaming,
And I'm not saying.
several of us who have been
No,
doing this a long
Don't
time know
don't
where
put
that's going
words
to
in
get
my
us,
mouth.
right?
I didn't say scream. I said that it needs
No,
to be
no, I know.
stronger. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
So that's
Fair
my
enough.
opinion. Thank you.
fair enough.
Also, if anyone would like to make suggested changes, we can, if we want to go bullet by bullet, or I'm happy to do that. And maybe we could do like a consent calendar if, if there's anything that you'd like to pull off to discuss further, we can take those. And then if the rest of the items are acceptable, maybe we can report.
Right, or a motion to accept it
Yeah.
is, is an option
If
as well,
folks
right?
are fine with it, then that's great, but, I'm happy to go paragraph by paragraph and, yes. And Paul.
I guess from my perspective, I kind of got thrown into this and I didn't get a chance to read or have a handoff from the prior council member from Montecito. So I'm really not sure as to where we're at and all of that. So if you're gonna take a vote today, then I'm gonna have to abstain.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, so I agree in general with Lydia. I think that one of the problems here is we're always in reactive mode. They can legislate any way or introduce any way they want, that's for sure. And then we're responding and saying, come to the table and tell us what we should be. I would like to be in the beginning of that before that legislation comes down. So because this document went there, they're moving forward. And I'm saying, what do you think? But we're not slowing down to hear what we think they're moving forward. So that kind of worries me. One of the comments you had here that I don't see anymore related to tenant protections, and it was really nicely worded that said, we recognize, for that one, we recognize
Each
the
city.
local city's rights to do what makes sense for their city. And some comment you have in here, we oppose to one size fit all, which is similar. I wouldn't mind having something in there that said we
I
recognize
agree.
that cities should have the right to
We
determine.
had consensus on that.
Yeah, because that was a very good way of putting out an issue that was divisive. And the last thing I'll comment on is, and I don't remember the discussion we had on this. We watered down and said we approve the opportunity to let people decide to go to 55% versus 2/3 in the tax. I don't remember the discussion we had on that. That kind of worries me only because we haven't yet gone over the bills that are proposed. For the bill proposed to do that, I like to parse that first before saying, yeah, put that up for voters. That's just my opinion. It worries me a little bit. I know that bill is on our list of bills,
Right,
but
yes.
this statement is saying, yeah, we agree that people should vote on that. I don't know enough about it, so I'd like to hear a discussion on that first, on that one point.
Okay. And it was specifically for housing?
Housing and infrastructure, but to me, it's
It was like
kind of,
on-
what does that mean? And to me, it's kind of like when they say, well, these apply to transit corridors. Well, what does that mean? My transit corridor is different than your city's transit corridor, but they may both fall into that term. And it's kind of the one size fits all. So just kind of, that 55% worries me. We don't know a lot about it.
So those are for revenue, bond measures,
Yeah, yeah.
basically, being at 55, so it's not everything, right?
Right. I guess I'd like to see how it's written and how it's defined.
Okay.
My concern.
And I'm not sure if that was that in in Chu's latest bill, or was that still under discussion?
ACA one.
Oh, it's ACA
Mary-
one.
Mary
Okay.
Aguilar.
Okay. Okay. So just a comment for Los Gatos. I know we sent in our letter ahead of time, pretty strongly worded, and I will end up supporting this just because ours is stronger, but it's nice to have two letters. And I do believe that there's value in having one consensus vote. And just for information for everyone, I know we're going to send separate letters. We're really focused on everything regarding funding. And so we're going to put most of our efforts on that funding, but would be happy to support a collective response that one size fits all doesn't work for us.
Any other comments? Any other?
I'll make a couple more then. One is that I think one thing that's missing here is one of the hallmarks of the league, and that is local control. And I think there should be a strong statement here about retaining zoning decisions at the local level. I really think we need, for me, if that's not here, then this letter doesn't make it for me, for our city either. And another thing that's a problem for us in Los Altos would be the comment, we support removal of regulatory barriers to building new accessory dwelling units. As far as we're concerned, there's been plenty removal already in the legislation that we already have passed, and that there's not more barriers that need to be removed. So we don't see why that would be in here at this point. With respect to CEQA, that's like some gimme. I don't believe CEQA is really the issue. I still think that's a big red herring. A project that comes in that complies with the general plan is automatically exempt from CEQA. So I think that's a big red herring, but you know, I'm not gonna kick a whole bunch about that. And the other thing that seems to me is missing here is any comment about the real cause of the problem. And the real cause of the problem is that there are essentially financial incentives for cities to build office and commercial buildings and not houses, because we can't support the infrastructure costs of housing given the fees we can charge and the structure that we can charge them. And so to me, if we can get the state to provide some sort of incentives to not necessarily a make whole, but I don't know if any of you, if your impact fees in any case actually meet your nexus studies. Are there any of you who actually charge what your nexus studies say would be a true charge? We aren't, we're not even close.
We do. You also have the long-term maintenance.
And you have, exactly. So to me, if we don't address the issue that the cities are having to put the costs of housing on the backs, the true cost of cities on the backs of other residents, is a disincentive to do this, and that trying to beat us over the head for something that first of all, we have no control over what gets built. And I think it's really important that when we put the bullet, the data behind here, which I think is really good, I think it needs to be in terms of what's been approved and not just permits. We really need to change that conversation with the state. We are letting the other side set the conversation by talking about permitted units. We don't have a bloody bit of control over what gets the permits. We approve the project, the builders for their own purposes sit on those. And I think we need to change the conversation and give the data that matter, that's actually within our control, and talk about that, and not just respond using the language and the conversation the way the other side wants to phrase it. And then for those of you who may not know, how many of you heard about what happened in Los Angeles last night? Anybody?
What happened in Los Angeles?
The Los Angeles County Democratic Party, Democratic Committee, voted unanimously to oppose SB 50. So as much as I know we want to be at the table and be nice guys, the truth of the matter is there's a large number of people who are standing up and saying SB 50 is a really bad idea. And I would really prefer that we have a stronger statement for our cities than what's here.
So this wouldn't preclude us from, taking a position on these bills.
Mhm.
And if we just want to say no on SB 50, I think we should do that.
Understood.
So, yeah, I guess this is an attempt to respond to some of the CASA points, but also, their general principles on housing that I would expect us to be able to hopefully use, past this whole discussion in this legislative term. So, that's why it's the way it is, and I wouldn't necessarily want to put in this document specific bill numbers.
No, I'm
I
not
think
suggesting,
we
I'm
should
not
just
suggesting we
take the
do.
position on
No,
bills.
I'm not suggesting we do. It's just for information so people will know that there are lots and lots of folks out there trying to do the right thing. And we ought to be supporting that in what we do. So for me, the ADU thing is a no-go. I'd like to see us talk about retaining local control over zoning and creating some incentives for housing rather than doing it with a stick. That's comments from, and then the change in the data to entitlements rather than permits. That's the comments from Los Altos.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I just have a process question. Part of this is obviously the sausage making.
Yes.
So we take this input and are we gonna go back and process it and come back with a different vision, and how do we weigh, one person's input versus, the whole? I mean, do we have a vote on each change, or? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
You bring up
Understand.
some good questions. I think our window of opportunity in terms of expecting any favorable response relative to this letter is closing on us soon.
Right.
So if we go another month on an iteration of this letter, I think we lose or get close to losing an opportunity for ourselves. So I think there's some sense of urgency associated with it. But in terms of how we go about all these various inputs and such, which are all very good points, I think what we ought to try to do is to find the elements that we all have consensus on, that we can all agree to, and then.
Or let's say quorum.
Okay, all right, sure. I mean, I'd love to have consensus, because it's a stronger message when we go out, but nonetheless, certainly a majority opinion associated with it. And then, again, there's nothing that precludes each of us within our cities to draft much stronger language like what Los Gatos has done, and maybe even a few others. So keep that in mind, right? This isn't the only message that we as our electeds get to espouse. Right?
And I think when, individual bills come up, SB 50 or even an ADU bill, right? We're gonna wanna look at exactly what it says.
Right.
When their tax measures come up, we may or may not be, in favor, right? So, but I do think we could water this down to the point where every one of us says absolutely yes, and we'd have half of the paragraphs here, and the problem with that's gonna be, it's not gonna say very much, right?
Exactly.
And it's not gonna say very much positive, and I think the problem is, I think the opportunity here is for us to assert some positive points on how we think we ought to approach this issue. Because if it's all just, we don't like it, right?
Okay, what can I?
That's-
We don't like it.
I didn't
I guess
say
it's
that.
original.
I was just expressing my
I'm
point
sorry.
of view
Go ahead.
about,
Sorry.
I'm trying to-
hanging on to some things that not everybody here may be in agreement on.
Well,
Hey, but Alice isn't done.
Let me suggest a process. So, if there are suggested changes or deletions, why don't we vote on those? And then
Yeah, I
based
mean, you
on
could
that,
go
we'll
through
have a new
Item
version.
by item and say,
And
you know,
then,
what's a straw poll or something.
I remember in a version I had a tenant protections, the one Paul you pulled out, that was in a previous one. I thought I had language about permits too, Anita. Somehow and I'm sorry, I was away in DC this week, and so that was part of the problem, was that we were trying to communicate in different time zones. But maybe what we do is I'll pull, if those 3 items are in agreement to move forward, I'll try to pull them out of old versions, and then at the executive board meeting, I'll just work on it while Jerry's talking, and then when we can vote on the final version. How's that? Does that sound okay? Because yes, I think we need to do something tonight. If we don't, time's just ticking and it's going to be too late.
Right.
So
And can I make one? Oh, I was just gonna make one more comment, kind of going to Lydia's question. And Lydia, let me know if I'm putting words in your mouth. But if there's a situation where there's a conflict between the letter that the cities association is crafting versus the position of your city, maybe you can reconcile that where there's elements of the cities association letter that you support, that you want to go out and also support the position that you're taking with your city. Even if there's some elements of that letter that are in conflict, as long as you're getting something in the cities association letter, then I think you can reconcile supporting both. But if they're totally in complete conflict, then
Yeah, we
then
all
you just
compliment.
The letter is
don't support
actually
it.
really good. It's just that I would have liked to have the emphasis of not including cities in the discussion from the very beginning, as well as moving forward, want to see that we're included. In addition to, I guess in the bottom of the letter, when you say oppose, support, that is pretty clear. Yeah, so, but thank you, Kathy.
actually, in the original version, we had small and medium-sized cities were not well represented in its creation, yet represent 66% of the Bay Area population. So if you want to put that back in, we could try to do that. Okay. So does that sound good? Can we go through the suggested changes, vote them up and down, and then I'll try to pull it out and work on it, and we'll vote on the final version at the executive board or the board meeting. That sound good?
Thank you.
So before we move to that, yes.
To chat with you. We all compromise, right? There's all things we're not gonna like in here. But is there a way to reference this when we're saying we support that? Maybe it's something as simple as the consensus of the cities association. It's something that said, that gives
Sure.
you an out or me an out to say, I agree with paragraph 1, which is moving forward and getting housing. But I'm not, I may say move this forward. You're right. We're gonna be running out of time. But that's the consensus here, and any one of us could disagree with any part of this. That might help. Somebody sign on.
So-
And me too as well.
We could add our introduction of who we are, city association representing 15 cities in Santa Clara County.
The consensus of that body is,
Yes.
which is a majority essentially.
Yeah. Does that sound good?
That makes it, I think that would be better for some.
Okay, great. Yes, Rowena.
So are you going to show the cities that by each bullet point that you have here, which ones have agreed to it and which ones haven't?
No,
No.
the final vote will just be on the entire document, once we decide what we're gonna keep and take out.
Unless it turned out to be
Then we should probably say.
Well, I mean, in fairness, right, if we can't get a majority, then. I don't
Then we
think
should
have a consensus.
probably not do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need an-
Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna take a stab at the changes that I've heard. Let me know if I missed anything. So first we'll add the preamble. Any opposition to that? No. And we'll mention consensus of the cities association.
Mhm.
The next item was in the first paragraph, the mention of CASA. Do we want to keep that?
Yes, but I think with the addition of what you and Lydia were talking about, put back in the.
Yes, okay. Okay, sure. Going to the first, we support paragraph, the 55% threshold on revenue bond measures. Are you okay with
That's
that?
one of those consensus ones.
Anyone opposed? How's that?
I'm opposed to it, the way it's written.
1, 2, 3, 4. All those in favor?
in favor of the way it's currently written?
Yes.
Actually, can we?
Put it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good idea.
if it's over there,
Just- Can you, I would, oh. So the first paragraph, the 55%, those supporting leaving it in as is, hands up, please. 2, 4, 5, 6. And opposed? Are you representing Campbell?
Can I just offer a comment?
Oh, okay, sure.
So, as your ABAG representative, I've been reading some other material and so forth. So I would offer strong support that taking action tonight would be really appropriate. The longer you wait, there's
Yes.
so much already happening. And also, I don't understand exactly what's happening, but I would offer a caution that the enterprise group that they're talking about managing the money
Mhm.
would have, if they're proposing it, would have the legislative ability to initiate tax measures and bond measures. So we just want to be aware that it's not quite the same as it is right now. It is subject to what that group might choose to do if the percentage was dropped.
Which would mean you're suggesting perhaps in that paragraph, down a ways, should a governance structure be used to administer new funds? You're suggesting you might want to look at that paragraph. for the
I'm
possible
just,
change.
I haven't read your letter, so I'm
Okay,
just,
well,
I'm just
we can- maybe
commenting.
when we come back to that. we
When
get
you
down
come
that
back, I
part.
just offer you those couple
No, I
of
think-
cautions.
Okay, so going back to the 55% threshold, I saw 6 for against the inclusion.
There were 4 of us.
4 of it for, so it will stay in. Moving to paragraph 4, we support the removal of regulatory barriers to building ADUs, and then the CEQA reform piece. So regulatory barrier, who wants to keep the regulatory barriers in?
Keep the regulatory barriers.
Or
Or keep it.
the removal of, I'm sorry, the removal of keeping it as is.
Okay, thank you.
What do you see as regulatory barriers? I'm just curious.
What is, can you explain
is
this?
Well, so you may have already dealt with it, but in our city, we're having challenges with non-conforming units, ADUs, and not being able to bring them up to code. But then I've learned our staff is telling folks to tear them down and rebuild them. And I would like to actually, find ways where we can grandfather them in. And when we met with Senator Wachowski, he had talked about something similar, I believe, and even finding funding to help people get things up to code. But why not just grandfather these non-conforming ADUs?
But you, as a city, you can do that. There's not a state regulatory barrier.
Well, apparently there's something at the state level that Senator Wachowski brought up.
My concern is that this opens the door for them to do all sorts of mischief, including what they're talking about of allowing them to be sold, entitled, and transferred to separate units, which is something we vigorously oppose. And that could be construed as a regulatory barrier, and that's a no-starter.
Could I suggest something here? We say, just drop the first part of this. We support incentives for production of new accessory dwelling units.
Can you, sorry.
We support
That sounds-
incentives for the production of new accessory dwelling units in our cities, as well as thoughtful secret reform to streamline the permitting process. So in other words, drop the removal of regulatory
And
barriers.
is it permitting or is it entitlement, which is the more correct technical term? I think entitlement.
Oh, yeah.
Correct.
Let's change that. So instead of permitting process,
Okay,
it'd be
yeah,
the
I mean,
entitlement process.
Either one,
Yeah.
right?
How's that? Was that? Sorry, does that work?
I mean, I've talked to developers who say, in my city, the park dedication fee is so big that it's a real barrier to production, and we might think about that.
Mhm.
So we actually haven't,
ADUs?
Yes.
yeah, the part fee that
It's the
some,
biggest.
that a
again,
homeowner
that's
would pay.
The city can set those, that's not a state regulatory law.
Right, so I think this
That's why I
statement
strike that.
really, really speaks to actions our cities may need enabling legislation to take, but frankly may not, right? This isn't, and we ought to be talking about the fact that we already have tools to produce. We already have, we have all of these tools. And we do think, right, that we ought to be using them. We support as much as possible, right, local control when we don't need new stuff from the city, the legislature. I mean, I don't think this is specifically directed at, everything here is directed at the legislature, right?
Right, agreed.
So if we change it to striking that regulatory barrier language and saying we support incentives for the production of new ADUs as well as thoughtful CEQA reform to streamline the entitlement process, does that
Or
work?
just to streamline their entitlement, right?
Well, can you add something in the order that they should conform to the code of each city?
For which part?
Specifically trying to do away with it.
I know.
And that's why it's not specific in here. It's got the more general language that Rod is suggesting, incentive for production.
So where would you want to put that, Rowena?
I'm sorry,
Where would you want to put that?
in that sentence.
Yeah, where in the sentence? We support incentives for production of new ADUs.
So what happens if you have a city that has onerous fees and restrictive zoning that's preventing the production of ADUs? Are we just saying that allowed or acceptable, or because
Well,
I don't
there
think
has
we're
been
actually-
reform,
right,
I mean, at the state level, right?
Mhm.
So that a lot of that's already happened.
Just how much do you want to allow it to happen? I guess that's where we're going right now.
We've
And-
talked about this in the
And
last year, right?
the language is good. I mean, to a certain extent. At the same time, for me, it's like we oppose top-down governance or one size fits all, but we're okay with you telling us what to do with ADUs and R1 lots.
We're okay with that, provided it passes our city code.
And that's what the state's saying is not okay.
Well, I
And that's
know.
what we're going in circles about.
Yeah.
so isn't the middle ground not necessarily top down, but at least establishing a floor where a city can't, have, again, onerous fees and zoning requirements where there's no ADU production or very limited ADU production. So
Well, we can argue that, but my opinion is that what they've done already legislatively does address that. Cities can't exclude them.
Well, so here's an example of an incentive, right, which is the language I'm suggesting. We want more teachers to be able to live in our community. Somehow, we, either a combination of legislature, cities get together, and we say, we're going to give an incentive to a homeowner. It could be fee reduction, or it could be other benefits. If they agree to at least do a teacher for the first 10 years, right?
Or you don't reassess the property, keep the tax roll the same.
Yes, so there could be a variety of things. There may need to be enabling legislation to make that happen. Right?
Okay, so
For what it's worth.
I'm going to suggest we vote on the Rod's changes. And so we support incentives for the production of new ADUs as well as thoughtful CEQA reform to streamline entitlements. And all those in favor of
Their entitlements.
their
right?
entitlements.
So that means we're not talking about getting rid of CEQA elsewise.
So
What did you say about secret just now?
Oh, I said to streamline their entitlement, meaning we're referring it back to the ADUs. So we're not simply saying we're opening up CEQA for, right? It's specific to this.
And I think we need to say to streamline ADU entitlement.
No, so that's
Well,
the
their
their,
entitlement.
THEIR.
Their production,
There
their
would be
entitlement.
technically CEQA.
Okay,
The
fine.
antecedent, so.
Whatever.
I go back to my English.
The entitlement of ADUs.
All right.
All right, all those in favor of keep, we support incentives for the production of new ADUs as well as thoughtful CEQA reform to streamline the entitlements of
ADU
ADUs, but
I
that
mean,
doesn't sound, we'll wordsmith it.
We'll get the
better,
grammar
but
correct.
all those in favor of including that paragraph? 2, 4.
Hey.
Yay.
whoa, got all of us.
Great, thank you.
Wow.
And then I don't have the language here, but it might be in the old version. We support tenant protections according to each city's, what each city deems fit. Something like that was what we had
We
before.
support tenant protections as each city finds appropriate.
So those in favor of adding that back in? Great, thank you. And then there was a clause about local control over zoning. I'm gonna have to find the language, but if you're in favor of the gist of that,
What was that again? I'm sorry.
maintaining
This is-
local control over zoning.
While I agree with that concept,
Mhm.
I don't think it's going to help our cause too much in this, incorporating it in this letter. That's my thinking. So I'd like to see us strike that.
I think it's the one thing that you have to stand up.
Yeah.
It also exists in our guiding principles. One size fits all. Or not, I mean, local controls and our guiding principles as well.
Yeah, right, exactly. We have that elsewhere. I don't think it fits in this letter at this time.
Okay, I'm just gonna take a vote
Can you read
now.
that again?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't have the exact language. And if you want to wait, we could wait on that till I find it and we could do it later at the board meeting if you want. Oh, the summarizing was to maintain local control over zoning. So if
Maintain.
it's not in there, yes.
Maintain or retain?
Maintain.
Maintain.
So all those in favor of that clause?
Putting
Putting that back. Yes.
I mean, here's the problem I see to your point. We already have a lot of things that put demands on us. So it could look unresponsive to it. Yes, a liberalization of ADU, density bonus law, right? Tools that have existed for a long time that are enabled by the legislature. So I think if we're going to say something like this, I would prefer to have it be a little more, I would prefer to have it be more surgical.
So
I'm concerned about something that broad that, frankly, hasn't been true.
can we vote on whether to include it, and then I will find the language, and then we can vote on that again if you don't like the language.
Yeah, because that's
Yeah.
how we phrase it.
Sure.
Really
Definitely.
determine my ultimate support.
Could we take a three-way vote then and say yes, no, or maybe?
You know what? Then why don't we just wait? Let me find the language, and then we can vote on it later.
The main point is that we do insert something about retaining local control.
Yeah.
Right. But just how that's phrased.
How we phrase
Right,
it.
just
is-
Exactly. It's gonna.
And then, so we'll put a hold on
Yeah,
that
she
one,
has that
and
one on
then
here.
So we don't.
Yeah, so I'm looking for another version.
And the last item was changing the permitting to the entitlement process. And there's something about, how they calculate whether we've reached our numbers or not based on
Oh,
the
yes.
permits. but it should be based on entitlements because we don't have control over the building of those units.
Yes.
So that's the gist of it. I'll find the language, but if you support that
That's not.
concept, it's not in there. I'll put it in later if you want it.
Yes, I
Yeah.
support that.
Great.
So
Okay.
which clause is that?
It's the one about
You gotta be
changing
measured on
permitting
that.
to entitlements. Yeah, it was painful, but that was it. Unless any last items. If not, could I get a final vote then to support?
Okay, so I'll make a motion to support the letter with the changes and after the fact, well, so long as the consensus is there. Because I really think that individual cities will write their letter,
Yes.
you wrote a letter.
Yes, yeah.
So
And
I
I
know that
think-
they will and will be able to do that.
Mhm.
I'm looking at this as a 30,000 foot level.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we don't need to get into the minutia, but we need to cover our bases.
Yes.
That's all.
Yeah.
So that's my motion.
Perfect.
So I just have a
Good
question. Does anyone
Yes.
think there's anything in here that's in conflict with what the state, that was a really nice brochure that you sent out, thank you, as part of the packet.
Oh, the-
Is there anything about this that we think is contravenes what the state association is saying?
Oh, the League of
The
Cities.
League of Cities.
California cities.
Should be
I
very
think it's
I
very
think so.
consistent.
It's very
Yeah.
consistent.
But I think it's
yeah.
important that we
Yes.
affirmatively make that comparison and say, hey, we think we're congruent with what the statewide organizations say.
What we end up
think
approving,
so.
Andy and Seth are in very close contact. So what we end up approving, she will send to him, and he will then send to both San Mateo and Santa Clara County. So that there's consensus, so that we're speaking as a Bay Area.
And Mariko and I both sit
Yeah,
on
they both
both
are. That's right.
boards. So
So,
there's
so
continuity.
yeah, we did try to be, and we trying to be consistent.
Saying that really for the benefit of folks who don't.
Sure.
If you wanted to be structurally consistent, you could reword or at least put in bold the we support in the sentence that begins should a governance structure.
Yes, and that was Liz's comment. So our statement says we support ABAG being the agency that would distribute.
Can you scroll down to that? So that
Sure.
Liz-
Yeah, you
I'm
can reword it
comfortable.
to start with we support. I mean, I like the point. I think it's a good one.
Yeah, we could say we support designating ABAG.
We recognize ABAG as the incumbent agency and we support it administering all functions rather than creating any one.
Any functions that might.
Yeah,
because-
exactly.
Well, I don't support the whole conference. There we go.
We recognize ABAG as the
Yeah.
incumbent
So
agency.
do you have any comments on how you would, knowing what you know, maybe recast any of that?
Can you see what? Do you need to?
We support ABAG.
We drafted this before David Chu's bill came out.
Mm-hmm.
So should we now just call out the enterprise by name?
Sure.
Like,
Oh,
because it's not
yeah.
we now know.
It's not hypothetical anymore.
So.
That's
Right.
true. So we could take out the should part and say we support
support
ABAG as the governance structure to
Rather than an
administer.
alternate such
Right.
as,
Mhm.
because it could be another one, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
What I think is important is that the ABAG, which consists of elected officials that are accountable. We don't want it to be appointed board that, and I use this phrase affectionately, like the high-speed rail board that was on the. We want it to be elected officials that are
So
accountable.
nice. You're being so nice.
And you so agree.
Okay.
What'd she say?
So I don't have the exact wording, but it would be something like we support ABAG, an elected body, as the governance structure to administer new affordable housing funds and monitor housing production.
Yes.
Yeah.
Instead of another
We
new
rec-
establishing
or maybe
a,
we
yet another
su-
agency.
we support ABAG recognizing that it's something
That's
about the fact that it already is doing this.
And
Or
to
should be.
I would say to monitor
We don't.
housing production.
Because
I hope you mean monitor housing production that results from those funds and not from not other housing production.
That's
Well,
given
ABAG
to-
already does that with the RENA, right? Yeah. So, I think you can just encompass all housing production. 'cause they do
Yeah.
that already.
Right. This would add taxing.
The housing authority is considered in our CHUA's bill is structured in such a way to generate additional revenue. And that's a power ABAG doesn't have.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the strategies. By choosing ABAG, you are then obviously limiting that financial authority, which is positive.
Thank you for that, because
Right.
that's another big concern is that the proposal for the enterprise group would be to have the authority to propose taxes, and all of that.
Yep.
So you want to.
That's a big one.
That's
a big.
Can we just, when we get that recast, can we get number given this? Double check the final language?
Sure. I'll just call you over while doing this. Okay, so all those in favor of that clause?
Aye. Oh,
Don't forget the.
And I need a friendly amendment to add all of this in. To my motion to approve.
Yes.
There you go.
Okay, so then all those in favor of the entire document with the changes, Debbie's motion, was there a second?
Oh.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. We did it.
And you have
We have 4 minutes
Wow.
left.
Good.
Thank
Wow.
you.
There's a lot of sausage you have to do.
Oh,
there.
yeah. I can feed the dogs all night. So quickly in 4 minutes, item B, this is just a laundry list of the bills that we have put on our watch list. And we're not going to obviously go through each of them. I guess my question was, in light of the number, I wanted to get a sense from all of you how you would like to tackle this. One, we could, and the options I thought of, and I'm happy to take other suggestions, was we can use the housing position paper that hopefully we pass tonight as a way to sift out what we support and oppose if it's related to housing. We can follow what the League of Cities does. That's number 2. Number 3, we could divide up these bills with our group, and if you have ones you're interested in and would be willing to research and then present at our next meetings, we could do it that way. And then the final one is, and it's a bigger issue, but we're pretty limited in resources in terms of tracking legislation. So if we really wanted to get serious about it, we probably should have a discussion of whether we want to obtain more help, frankly.
So can we
So-
pool, do we have any staff?
I was trying to come up with as many options
Do
as
we
I
have
could.
any staff from our cities tracking this that we can kind of pool together? I think this was your
We,
initiative, right?
we've got a group together, but that is it's extremely limited because those staff are, besides Palo Alto and San Jose, the tracking is very limited.
So my question is, would Palo Alto or San Jose ledge experts be willing to come and talk to us and share their views?
They have so far been unavailable to do so, and I'm not sure if it's unavailable or unwilling.
Where's the mayor?
He's at
So yes. So in light of, yes, Marika.
So again, the more we utilize other people's resources,
The better, yes.
So the League of Cities has a lobbyist tracking this.
Okay.
And so it'd be nice if we piggyback onto their efforts.
Okay.
And they do, I do communicate with them frequently. They just have an entire state to talk to. And Seth has another standing meeting on
Thursday.
second Thursdays. So that makes him limited to be
Right.
here. And we've been discussing how he might join by Zoom or something, but
But at least we could share material so that.
Yeah.
of which we are doing right now.
Exactly. But again, I'm most interested in the enterprise and the funding, so I'd be willing to do 9 and 10 with goals associated with 9 and 10.
Thank you.
If you're looking for individual crazy people to sign up, I would sign up for the stuff on ADUs, but in addition to 69, AB 68, and AB 587, which involves a separate sale of ADUs, that's all packaged as far as I'm concerned, and I'll take all of
So 69, SB 13, and I'm sorry, you mentioned one
them.
other bill?
SB 68 and I'm sorry, AB 68, it's also another one, too, and AB 587, which is a separate sale and title transfer.
Okay, great, thank you. Any others?
SB 330.
Would you be willing to do the other two and to go category 6?
Yeah.
Great. Any others? And if not, we can probably take the rest. But thank
I
you.
think
That's
AB
really
4
helpful.
is really important because it may well be that SB 4 ends up substituting for SB 50 as we get down the road. There's a move to.
Well, I think we can, between Andy and I, we can do the rest of them. That's really helpful if you take those.
So is our plan that each of our next few meetings are going to be able to tackle at least a
Yes.
set of these, not
Yes.
all of them at once?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Good.
Great.
I was also going to say, Margaret, too, that our government affairs group also does an analysis on these bills, which is publicly available information that I can provide.
And they do share with me. Yeah.
But if it's on a standard link and me what the link was.
No. Great. Okay. That was anything else for item B? If not, we go to 4. Item 4, next steps. I think we just discussed that. Public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak? No? If not,
We'll have another opportunity at the next meeting.
adjourn. The next meeting in April, there is a need to do the selection committee meeting. It's actually for the task force on CASA. So we wanted to get a sense that would you be willing to meet at 5 on the same night, or meet on a different night, and we can do a doodle poll, or just not have one until. But then May we have a general meeting, don't we? So we need to have one. So would folks be able to come at 5 for our LAC? Yes. Okay, great.
This is on the 11th, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
April 11th.
Okay.
Great. Then we
Well
are
done.
adjourned. Thank
Okay,
you.
very
Thanks
good.
a lot.
So we've got some pizza up here. If anyone wants to grab some pizza before we reconvene in the next meeting, that'd be great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Okay,
all.
okay, so I have on my other computer, I know they're there.
There is an event in Palo Alto on Sunday on SB 50, and I'm sure.
Did you have it?
Should I-
and
should I
did you
share?
Send it to me? Okay, yeah. Here.
This.
Here, I'm gonna send it. Trevin sent me something else, but Margaret. Margaret just is asking me to look for something real quick, so can you just hold on 1 second?
You want me to hold on?
Yeah,
Okay.
just 1
Yeah, no
minute.
problem.